Hello, welcome. My name is Vikram Chandra and you're watching This World, a show where we get you the week's biggest stories from around this world. Tonight, we begin with Auto GPT. Yes, I've been talking to you at great length about AI. Now remember, GPT-4, it launched on the 14th of March, and I was telling you about how it could be potentially revolutionary. Well, it's the 15th of April, and the world of AI has already moved a generation ahead. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to you about Auto GPT, a new innovation that can use the power of GPT to develop itself autonomously. It creates AI agents. Agents that can then reproduce, agents that can collaborate with each other, that can have memory. They have memory, they remember what's happened. They can potentially access the internet as well. Is this revolutionary? Well, I would say that it is potentially nothing short of life-changing, and that's really the way the entire world seems to have reacted to this. A man called Nathan Lanz and some others stumbled upon what was happening in open source communities with Auto GPT, and after that, it completely blew up. Guess what? Nathan Lanz is going to be joining us right here on this show a few minutes from now to tell us what exactly is happening with Auto GPT and whether it's going to save the world, whether it's going to lead to utopia, whether it's going to lead to the end of the world or something in between. He's going to be talking to us about this just a short while from now. Also on the program, we will be talking about West Asia. We're going to be talking about a region in the midst of multiple wars and also multiple peace processes. Earlier this year, two countries in West Asia were struck by a monster quake. I'm talking, of course, about Turkey and about Syria. They were struck by a 7.8 magnitude quake. In the hours and days that followed, the world had to ensure that help reaches everybody, reach everyone who's affected as quickly as possible. And while planes and trucks carrying aid reached Turkey in no time, the road to Syria came with multiple hurdles. There were border restrictions, closed borders. Basically, the war in Syria had upended the entire crisis. So much so that the parties involved in the war agreed to relax certain restrictions to allow for a seamless transfer of aid. It now turns out that Iran apparently abused the relief flights to send arms into Syria to the Houthis. This is a story that Reuters broke earlier this week, and we are going to be talking about it in great detail very, very shortly. So you know that famous saying that sometimes change can happen over decades and sometimes decades of change can happen in weeks, and that's almost exactly what we are seeing with artificial intelligence or with AI. It's been spoken about for years and decades, and now suddenly every single week what's happening with AI doesn't fail to take you by surprise. If you remember, just last month, I told you about GPT-4. I told you about how this revolutionary new program was and how it could potentially have a major impact. Now, in exactly a month, GPT-4 is starting to look a little outdated. And that's because something more radical, something more advanced, something more revolutionary seems to be happening in just 1 month's time. That's how fast AI is progressing. Let me just recap for you. 4 months ago, ChatGPT was launched. This is in December. It had natural language capabilities that no one had ever seen before, and everyone got really excited. Then in March, GPT-4 was launched, and it was a clear generation better than ChatGPT. Now, meet Auto GPT. It's been spoken about for the last week or so after people like Nathan Lanz and a few others they stumbled upon it and decided to put it out there on Twitter. And then it blew up. Those tweets went viral. A lot of people got really excited. And then seeing that, other people jumped onto it and started to do their own development. And that's when this entire thing started to spiral. So very clearly, Auto GPT was not something that was put out by OpenAI, by any other big software powerhouse. It is an open source Python application. It was first developed by significant gravitas, and now it's being used by members of the general public to do some really, really crazy things. What does Auto GPT do? Well, essentially, it uses GPT-4 as a base to then act autonomously without human prompts. In a nutshell, this is what Auto GPT is allowing people to do. They can create AI agents. Those agents can then replicate if they have to, and they will keep working on a particular task or a solution until it is completed. Also, and critically, they can work with each other in a very collaborative manner. And all of this on their own, with no further human intervention. Anything else? Yes, GPT-4 had no memory. In other words, after you finish a session, it was done. But now, people have figured out how to give Auto GPT memory. In other words, these agents can remember. They can remember what they were working on. There are places where that memory can be kept. Anything else? Yes, and this is the big one. People have also figured out how to give Auto GPT agents access to the internet. They can go to the internet and acquire any information that they need. Now, this is powerful beyond belief. Just take a look at some of the wild things that people are doing with Auto GPT just in the last 4 or 5 days. It can independently do sales research. It can craft podcasts, give the entire structure for the podcast. It can do market research, probably better than humans can. It can do customer service, something that most humans hate to do. It can be a social media manager. It can be a financial advisor. The capabilities of Auto GPT and its offshoots are so advanced that people are already starting to wonder whether AGI or artificial general intelligence is here. In fact, one of the offshoots of Auto GPT was actually called Baby AGI, and then within 24 hours it grew up to be Teenage AGI. Well, we are probably not yet at fully blown AGI just yet, artificial general intelligence just yet, but Auto GPT is definitely a step closer towards that. And that's both wonderful and it's alarming. What's almost startling here is the rate of advancement. I honestly thought even 3 months ago that we were at least a decade away from AGI, or maybe longer. And why just me? Anyone who studies or researches on AI would have told you that AGI is something that is still a decade away or longer. But now it looks, who knows, by the end of this year, I could be sitting out here and telling you that AGI is already here. I don't know if it's going to happen. No one can tell you what's happening, but I can tell you it is already time to start preparing for that age from now, where everything that we know as of today will change, and it will change in next to no time. Now, it could be fabulous, or it could be terrible. Why the latter? Well, as I tweeted earlier this week, take a look at the capabilities of Auto GPT. Auto GPT can, as I said, reproduce through autonomous agents, have memory, recursively self-improve, have internet access, and hence have access to infinite information, keep going till its objective is met. This is essentially a path to every scary artificial superintelligence scenario ever written. You know, the Skynet theory, the Matrix theory, all those discussions we've been having about runaway AGI that then becomes super intelligent and wipes out the human race. Auto GPT and its offshoots seem to have eliminated all the guardrails that would have potentially prevented that from happening until OpenAI sort of switches off access. So access to the internet, for example, that was a very important guardrail. Now it seems to have gone. So we should be concerned. But even if none of that happens, the world is clearly changing before our eyes, and in the most dramatic manner possible. At a very minimum, artificial intelligence could be making business decisions in firms, whether to close a business, whether to launch a new product, where to buy stocks or which assets you should sell. You're not going to need necessarily business honchos or business consultants or so many things by the end of the year. Is this the start of the changing or the end of workforce in offices? I don't know. Is it the start of the end of the world as we know it? Almost certainly. Let me now put those questions to Nathan Lance. As I said, he was the person whose Twitter feed really was one of the places where people started to go to see what is happening in Auto GPT. And from there, the community really took it on and has taken it forward. Nathan Lance now joins us. You're in Kyoto, right, Nathan?
Yeah, Vikram, I'm in Kyoto. I lived in San Francisco for about 13 years and recently moved out here.
So I have to tell you that along with the rest of the world, I've probably been sitting on your Twitter feed trying to wait for the world to blow up or for Auto GPT to come up and do something really crazy. So yeah, just help us in dissecting this in sort of words of one syllable as you do. Auto GPT, at least on the face of it, seems to be a generation ahead of anything we've seen so far. And it's improving with every passing day.
Yeah, it's incredible. You know, I only discovered Auto GPTs about a week ago and started writing about them. And after I started writing about them, Jeff Bezos followed me on Twitter, and all kinds of crazy amounts of people have been contacting us. And When I discovered it, I discovered Baby AGI, which was created by Yohei Nakajima, and Yohei is a venture capitalist who can't code, and he just came up with this idea and had the GPT-4 help him to create the code and create the paper to explain the code and everything. And basically what Auto GPTs are, the concept is that, when you use Chat GPT, maybe some of your viewers are familiar with, Chat GPT, obviously you have to type to it and talk to it with it. And but with Auto GPTs, the idea is, what if you gave, what if you put several GPT-4s together and had them collaborate with one another, and then gave them a memory to, to remember what's been done, and also assign them roles. So with Baby AGI, he actually has it set up where there is a manager GPT-4, and then there's two other basically worker GPT-4s, and he has them collaborate with one another. But this is an early experiment. You can't do a ton with it yet. These systems do have limitations. They tend to get stuck and have a hard time figuring out what to do next.
Everything that you're saying, Nathan, now this is open source. This is not being done by OpenAI. This is not being done by Microsoft or Google or any of the companies. This is now just people out there taking the power of GPT, building open source software. And that means it's completely out of control. Would that be a right way to say this? Both the good parts and potentially the bad parts that I'm going to ask you about could be entirely out of control right now.
I don't think it's out of control. I mean, these services are still relying on OpenAI, at least for now. They're basically amplifying what OpenAI has, their APIs. But you could imagine, as other open source large language models come out that compete with ChatGPT, then yeah, you could start to say that there's not really a way to control any of this. That I would say that's correct.
So just curious, you're talking to so many people around this. What percentage of the people you're talking to, and you've been studying this very closely, what percentage seem to be saying the human species is about to come to an end in the next 5 years or 10 years? What percentage are saying there's going to be utopia and we're going to solve all of human problems? And what percentage are somewhere in between?
When I talk to real friends who've started successful companies in Silicon Valley, et cetera, I would say, it's probably more like, at least in my circles, it's probably like 10% of people who think that this is a possible end of the world kind of thing. Probably another 20% think that this is going to lead to a utopia, and the other 70% are somewhere in the middle. Right. I tend more towards the utopia side.
Okay, tell me about that. Why do you think this is going to lead to utopia and not lead to human extinction?
I don't believe in some of the arguments that I've heard about how this is going to escape, and that it's going to decide that humans should be destroyed or something. I don't believe this. I believe that you can actually program these systems to care about human life. Yeah, and at least for now, there are guardrails on, and I personally believe that this is going to lead to major breakthroughs in things that just totally change the world, like in terms of healthcare, discovering cures for cancer. I've got friends with cancer and things like this. I think this technology is going to do incredibly good things.
Let's really hope that you're correct and it's not going to mean the end of humanity. And let's hope that the utopia part also does actually work out. But at a minimum, it is going to change, and just from some of the examples we've been seeing, and let's remember it's only been, 3 months since ChatGPT came and then GPT-4, so it's accelerating, right? Is it fairly safe to say that 2024 will be nothing like 2022 was? Nothing similar. Everything will have changed. Business will have changed. The way people are doing their jobs will have changed. The way people are communicating will have changed. The world will be a very different place a year, 2 years from now, for sure.
A lot of people don't realize what next year is going to look like. And obviously no one can predict, but it's hard to see that by the time that this technology keeps improving, Auto GPTs combined with a better model, let's say GPT-5, let's say GPT-4 gets 3 times better, 5 times better, 10 times better. It's hard to see how business and money and a lot of things don't have to be reconsidered. On a personal level, I have some concern. My larger concerns are probably around geopolitical issues, right? Like what does it mean when one country owns that, and do other countries who are enemies of that country, how do they react to that as well, right? So that, yeah. But yeah, the world's definitely going to change, and I think a lot of people are, even though they see some of this stuff right now, and they're like, "Oh, that's cute," or "Oh, that's kind of useful." I think they're not properly extrapolating and seeing where this is going to go in a year or two. And I think large parts of business are going to be able to be automated with this technology. And on the other side, you're going to be able to turn some people into basically superhumans with this technology, right? You're going to be able to have some people who can do the work of 100 people as a single person, or maybe even 1,000.
All right, and we're going to keep checking back with you every few months to see are we heading towards extinction or utopia or somewhere in between. It's an interesting choice to have before us, and one of those is going to work out in the next few years. Thank you so much, Nathan, for joining us.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, so there you have it, and it's always interesting when Nathan Lance, who actually was one of the people who really brought Auto GPT to everyone's attention with his Twitter post, and he's clearly in the utopia camp, as you just heard, but even he does think that there's a 10% chance of human extinction, or at least that's what his circle is telling. 70% of people are saying somewhere in between, but the world is going to change forever. Let's move on to our next story. Early this week, Reuters published this report. It accuses Iran of exploiting, quote, earthquake missions to fly weapons to Syria, unquote. The report says that Iran used earthquake relief flights to bring weaponry and military equipment into Syria. The story begins on the 6th of February, when the mega quake struck Syria along with Turkey. Some 6,000 people died in Syria alone, and within days, flights from across the world took off for Syria, carrying all sorts of aid, humanitarian, medical. Among the many flights that landed, there were also flights from Iran. But apparently, these flights weren't carrying aid alone. These humanitarian flights were also carrying communication equipment, radar batteries, spare parts. What for? To upgrade Syria's air defense system. And all of this is really what the Reuters report is saying. But why would Iran want to upgrade Syria's air defense system? Because Tehran has big stakes in Syria's ongoing civil war. It has been fighting on behalf of and with the Bashar al-Assad regime. Now, ever since the war broke out, Western powers have slapped a whole host of sanctions on Syria. As for America, it's been slapping Syria with sanctions since 1979. That was when Washington designated Syria as a state sponsor of terrorism. On the 10th of February, the US suspended these sanctions for 180 days because of the earthquake. Now, the Reuters report quotes an Israeli defense official as saying, under the guise of shipment of earthquake aid to Syria, Israel has seen significant movements of military equipment from Iran, mainly transported in parts. Now, where exactly were these shipments delivered? Apparently, mainly in northern Aleppo. Now, what's the importance of this? Well, along with the recent tensions in Israel after the police action at Al-Aqsa, it potentially destabilizes the Middle East just as the tension is starting to move to the multiple peace processes that are also going on. We've all heard about the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, Saudi Arabia seems to be making efforts to broker peace in other areas as well. Let's just take a look at what's been going on in the last few days.
The sands of West Asia are shifting again. Earlier this week, Syrian Foreign Minister Faiz al-Meghdad arrived in the Red City of Jeddah. This was the first such visit since the outbreak of the civil war and since Saudi Arabia cut ties with Syria in 2012. In Jeddah, Meghdad held talks with his Saudi counterpart, Prince Faisal bin Farhan. The two sides agreed to resume flights and consular services. Cut to Friday, Saudi Arabia hosted a regional meeting. It was attended by 9 countries, namely Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Iraq, and Jordan. On the agenda was Syria and ending Syrian isolation. Is West Asia witnessing normalization of ties with Syria? Will Syria now return to the Arab League? It was suspended from the body in 2011, following the Bashar al-Assad government's crackdown on pro-democracy protests. The next Arab League summit is scheduled for the 19th of May 2023, and it will be hosted by Saudi Arabia. What are the chances Syria will be a part of the summit?
So war or peace, what's actually coming to the Middle East? Let me put that question to John Erath. He's a senior director at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. John, thank you so much for being with us. You must have seen this report about possible Iranian arms shipments to Syria. What's the latest that you can tell us on the situation on the ground there?
Yes. There have been reports that there are additional weapons going from Iran to Syria mixed in with some of the humanitarian assistance for the post-earthquake situation there. Iran has denied that it is providing such weapons in such a manner, but I don't think we have any way to independently verify whether or not this is happening. But that's not what's important here. What's important is that there are weapons that are finding their way to Syria and into the hands of the Assad regime, which has a terrible record of human rights violations, of violence against its own people, use of chemical weapons, use of thermobaric weapons, and other very inhumane kinds of things. So the presence of more weapons there is something that is of great concern.
But obviously the fact is also that with the situation that we are seeing in Israel and the rising tension that's been there, including on the borders, there's always the possibility that some of those weapons can actually be used against civilian populations in Israel, for example, and that could further escalate tensions.
That, of course, is a possibility, and it's something that would be very bad. But also the weapons are being used against civilian populations in Syria. The presence of more weapons increases the danger that they could further leak across borders into neighboring countries and destabilize the entire region.
So I was just wondering about the rapprochement, if you like, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. How do you see that playing out? It could be, you could argue that Iran, with all that is happening towards peace there and other places, maybe it'll start being more moderate in some ways. Other people believe that it could embolden Iran and get it to take more aggressive steps. How do you see it playing out?
I think it's still rather early to evaluate what the further effects of the increased connections between Iran and Saudi Arabia will be. If Iran feels less isolated and less threatened, that's probably a good thing and could lead to some moderation in the policies of its government. Saudi Arabia has said repeatedly that if Iran were to develop nuclear weapons, then Saudi Arabia, would have to take corresponding steps. And that, of course, would be very hazardous for the entire region if there were more nuclear weapons present. So perhaps this rapprochement between the two countries might lead to some diminishment of those tensions.
Last question, what do you think is the worst case situation of what could happen with Iran and inside Syria, and what are the weapons that could have potentially been provided there?
The worst case situation would be if there is a further supply of weapons that goes in there, if Syria becomes a failed state and you have territory being taken over by basically armed terror groups with access to advanced conventional weapons. That would be able to export this instability throughout the Middle East region.
John Erath, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. And that's all we have for you this week on This World. We will be seeing you with a fresh lineup of stories next week, and also the big newsmakers. My name is Vikram Chandra, and you're watching This World on WION. The World is One.